Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Stephan podcast. This show is brought to you by Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For US listeners, you can find it over at getbold.io. Now, today, rejoining me after a few years on the show is Dr. Philipp Bagus, and he is a professor at Universidad Rey Juan Carlos. He's a fellow of the Mises Institute. He's the author of various books, but today we're going to be talking about Philipp's latest book, which is Full Reserve Banking versus the Real Bills Doctrine. So, Philipp, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Stephan. It's great to be back.
Great. So, yeah, I really enjoyed reading the book. I, just finished reading it, and I thought there were some really great insights in terms of the whole full reserve banking debate and understanding monetary theory and capital goods and these various aspects. So we're going to get into all of these things today. But I like to start with why. So from your perspective, why care about all this full reserve banking stuff? Why is it so interesting to you?
Well, because fractional reserve banking, which is the opposite opinion, that is the idea that banks do not have to hold or should not hold 100% reserves, but can create new money out of thin air, is one of the main problems that we have. Not only the monetary system, but its ramifications. Yeah, you know the importance of money. If you have a bad monetary system, its ramifications go through all society. Yeah, it allows the state to grow. It allows for unstable situations, which also have redistributional effects and psychological effects. So. And cultural effects also. So the issue of fractional reserve banking versus full reserve banking is, in my opinion, vital for civilization.
Yeah, and look, I have to say I fully agree with you, but let's kind of talk it out and talk about some of these different issues. As probably many listeners know, this is a long-standing debate, arguably hundreds of years old debate in some ways, but in, let's say, recent decades, a lot of Austrian economists, such as yourself, Hans-Hermann Hoppe, Joseph Salerno, Bob Murphy, Bagus, yourself, Howden, there's been a lot of people writing about this from the full reserve perspective, and then there are those arguing for they would call themselves more of a free banking perspective, but I guess we would see that as a pro-fractional reserve perspective. And in this particular book, you're going after Rallos's book and discussion around real bills. So maybe to sort of set some of the context and maybe some of the historical reason for us, can you just spell out a little bit about just the basics of the currency school and the banking school and where they differ?
Yeah, the discussion, as you allude to, goes back to the 19th century, to the debate in England or the UK between the currency school and the banking school. The banking school wanted or defended a banking system with fractional reserves without a central bank. So they thought that banks should be free to produce new money if there would be more demand for money. Yeah, so they argued in favor of a flexible money supply, that could adjust to the demand for money. While the currency school argued in favor of 100% reserves. And they thought that, well, fractional reserves, this currency school argued, is the origin of business cycles, and financial instability. And in fact, on a political level, the currency school prevailed with the Peel's Bank Act of 1844, which established 100% reserves for bank notes. So then banks could only issue notes if they had 100% reserves for them. However, they forgot to include in the bill demand deposits. So the banks could issue demand deposits without 100% reserves. Yeah. So from then on, banks shifted their business from issuing unbacked notes to unbacked bank deposits, demand deposits. So in practical terms, the currency school forgot to include demand deposits in the money supply that had to be backed by 100% reserves. The other flaw the currency school had, that they wanted to have a central bank, that would control the banks, that they would fulfill these legal requirements. But and here we come back to the question how to call it, free banking or fractional reserve banking. In fact, you don't need a central bank. It's very dangerous to have a central bank in place. You just need banks that fulfill the legal obligations that is and standard and traditional legal obligations to hold 100% reserves for deposits, for demand deposits. Why? Because the depositor thinks that he has the money always available, and if he thinks so, the bank is not allowed to use the money deposited and lend it out to someone else. This is just legal principles where you don't need a central bank for that. And therefore I would call this 100% banking system a free banking system, because it's according to the general legal principles, and don't need a central bank. And the other system, which defends the banking school, is the fractional reserve school, which they call free banking because they like, of course, the word free. And they refer to free banking as without a central bank. And that is true. They think that this system can regulate the amount of money, the supply of money to the demand of money without a central bank, autonomously. So this is the old debate. And then this debate has, actually there was a debate before in the School of Salamanca, where Soto in his book, Money, Bank Credit and Economic Cycles, explains the forerunners of the debate that goes back to the Spanish School of Salamanca. And this debate now has repeated itself, let's say, within the Austrian School of Economics, where, as you have said, they are proponents or defenders of 100% banking, which we could call Mises, even though there's the debate. The fractional reserve bankers, they claim it's not so clear. However, I think, at least from 1953, with the American edition of the Theory of Money and Credit, he defends a system where all new money substitutes must be backed by 100% reserves. But what is clear is that Rothbard is a 100% or full reserve theoretician, Salerno, Hoppe, Hülsmann, Walter Block, Jesus Walter Soto, David Howden, and myself. And we have engaged in a debate with the other side. Lawrence Wright is, of course, on the other side of the fractional reserve bankers, and George Selgin. And in Spain, it's Juan Ramón Rallo. So Rallo wrote actually a book criticizing Mises' monetary theory, and I'm criticizing Rallo's book and the theory behind the book, because he's criticizing Mises using his real bill fractional reserve banking theory, which is very similar to Antal-Feketti's theory, actually. So this is basically here.
Gotcha.
The debate.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess one other, zooming out kind of question, I guess the way the full reserve camp is seeing it is sort of like the government is giving a special privilege to some of these people, and that's what's enabling this fractional system, right? This idea that they can suspend redemption of specie, that they can have, legal tender laws to treat the IOUs the same, and these kinds of things actually act almost like this kind of artificial government subsidy. And now on the banking side, there are people who want that privilege because obviously being able to just issue more, monetary tickets than actual money proper that you have in your vault is obviously highly, highly profitable. So there's a lot of bankers who want that. But then, it seems that there's this justification that, it's because of the needs of trade or because of this, that, and the other. Is that one way to view that, or how would you kind of sort of view the differing participants there?
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, so if I say free banking, I see it that it's a banking system where there are no privileges. Yeah, there are no legal privileges against the standard legal rules or legal principles. Yeah, so in such a system, banks cannot appropriate money deposited. Yeah, money, people, depositors that give the money to the bank to use it at every moment they please to. They think they have it available when they make their buying decisions, purchases. They think, well, how much do I have on the bank? So they think they have it available. They want to have it available. So then in this case, the bank legally, in a free legal system, cannot use the money, because then there would be a double availability. The two people at the same time would use it. The person who makes his purchases thinking that he has the money, and and the bank who lends it out to someone else. So this is then a free banking system. However, the fractional reserve bankers, they like, of course, to call they see it differently. They think there are no legal problems with this.
Yeah, I see. I think that double availability you're touching on is really a very, very important point to understand, because the way I'm reading it, the way, when I read Huerta de Soto's Money, Bank, Credit and Economic Cycles, it really comes down to this idea of, if you have an expansion of credit not backed by voluntary saving up front, that's where you cause this business cycle. And so there's kind of a complicated sort of reasoning of why you get this artificial lengthening of the capital structure of production and so on. But it comes, I think at the very base of it, as you said, this double availability seems to be the crux of the issue. It seems to be that either you need to understand which side of the thing you're on. Like, if you have put this money into, let's say, a vault, and it's, say, you are not, you are, I guess, there's one side of it where you are saying, I've put this money into a time deposit and I no longer have access to that. Or I've put money into this vault and I retain access to that. I guess that's the crucial distinction, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the distinction between loans and deposits. So in a loan, I give up the availability for a certain period of time of the funds, of the purchasing power, and I transfer it to someone else who uses it. So there's no double availability. And in a deposit, the idea of the deposit is that I want to retain the availability at all time. Why do I do the deposit? But to use the transfer system to make transfers, wires, or because I think it's safer than at my house. And I want to, for comfortability, it's more comfortable to use it this way. So therefore I make the deposit, but I want to retain the availability at all times. If not, I could lend it out. Then I would lose it and earn interest. But I want to retain it. So, and this is the second case of the deposit. Then of course, the bank cannot use it, or the person who gets the money cannot use it. You may call it a bank or not, because I can deposit money with you and say, hey, Stephan, can you take care of this money? And I want to be able to use it whenever I want, ask it for you. And I pay you for that also, for the service to look after my money. Then you should not be allowed to use it, to loan it out to someone else, because then we have the double availability. And this legal problem of the double availability then leads to the economic problem that you pointed out, that then new money is created. New perfect monetary substitutes are created, loaned out, introduced into the loan market. So there's an additional supply, which is not backed by real savings, but just because there has been new money created due to this double availability problem. And this new money injected into the loan market increases the supply of loans and therefore reduces the price of these loans, that is the interest rate, artificially. And it's artificially because this this reduction of the interest rate is not because savings have increased, but just because new money has been produced. So it's an artificial decrease of the interest rate caused by credit expansion. And this, as you know, the interest rate is very important as coordination for savers and investors, so and for entrepreneurs. So if the interest rate decreases, it's in a free market, it's a sign that more savings are available for new projects. So then with a lower interest rate, more investment projects look or seem to be profitable, and are profitable with that lower interest rate, and then there's an artificial boom. There are more investment projects started. However, they cannot be finished because it is all an illusion. There are not more real savings available. There was just an artificial reduction of the interest rate due to the credit expansion of the fractional reserve banking system. So it's very nice and nicely explained in the book of Huerta de Soto that it's actually a legal or ethical problem of double availability. Then if you make something legal, which is should not be, because it's against the general legal principles, then you will have social problems. Then you will have also economic problems, and this is in the form of the business cycle.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, and so the point that is maybe difficult for people to understand if they haven't sort of read some of the books is maybe this concept of the capital structure and understanding that you need enough to sustain the people who are undertaking that new project. And so that's probably the point where there's not enough savings to justify this many people who are, let's say, consuming, because they are not able to put all the resources that they need to make their project come to fruition. And that's kind of where this artificial lowering of the interest rates are coming into it. So I guess we should bring it to the Real Bills Doctrine and sort of explain in the modern context of this debate what's happening here, because it sounds like the Real Bills Doctrine, or that kind of idea, is being used as a justification for fractional reserve banking, as we would call it. And so it sort of seems to be this idea that, it's among commercial terms and terms of trade, and these banks are kind of issuing commercial paper, and therefore it's a real bill. As I'm understanding it, that would be their argument. Or can you maybe characterize the Real Bills Doctrine before we then go and critique that?
Yeah, for instance, there's a difference between Rallo and the Real Bills fractional reserve banking theory and the one of George Selgin and Larry Weitz, because Rallo says, well, fractional reserve banking credit expansion is bad, problematic, if the banks uses the money deposited to issue a mortgage. That is a very long-term loan. Because then he says that the real problem here is the maturity mismatching. That the bank gets basically, he sees the deposit as a loan, as a very short-term loan, and this is lent out for a long term. So he sees there's a problem, but he says fractional reserve banking is not a problem if the bank uses the money deposited to buy or to purchase, or how it's also called, discount real bills. That is commercial papers. That is very short-term loans up to 30 days, which are backed by goods. So in the process of production, or which are very close to production. That is very safe loans, or at least they say it's very safe because they are backed. So if the debtor cannot pay back the commercial commercial paper, then you get the goods. And he says then it's not a problem because it's very short term, and it's in a response to an increase in the demand for money, the needs of trade. So this goes back then to the needs of trade argument by the banking school. The idea is, well, there's a company that is producing goods, and then it needs money to transport it to the final consumer, for instance. So basically the goods are already produced, maybe bottles of water, they are produced. There's more demand for these bottles of water, therefore more has been produced, but now the company needs money to transport it to the final consumer, and then it issues a commercial paper, and the bank buys it using the money deposited, thereby creating new money, and then it's transported to the consumer, and the consumer pays for it, and then the company pays back in 30 days the commercial paper, and then the new money that has been produced is destroyed again, because it's paid back, with all credit expansion, if the loans are paid back, the money supply, in the same way as it increased before, now shrinks back. So, and then the idea is, of course, if there's more production of bottles of water, then there will be more demand for these loans. The needs of trade increase, so the banks increase the money supply, and then when they don't need it anymore, if it's paid back, then the money supply decreases again. This is the law of reflux. It's called the law of reflux, that the bills are paid back. It flows back, so to speak. And it's according to the needs of trade. The more is produced, the more bottles of water is to produce. If there's economic growth, for instance, then the more money is produced. And this allows, and this has advantages. So Rallo says it's not, or actually the Real Bills people, they say, it not only has no problems, this real bill fractional reserve banking, it's also beneficial. Why? Because if there is this new production of bottles of water, which leads to a higher demand for money, if the banks would not increase the supply of money, you see that the idea is that the fractional reserve banking rebuild system adjusts the money supply to the demand of money. So it's a flexible money supply that increases according to the needs of trade. If they would not do it, what would happen if the demand for money increases? Well, prices would fall. And this would be bad. And here comes in, as you know, last time we talked about deflation, right? Because I wrote the book in defense of deflation. So there comes in a subject which is very near to me, because I wrote a lot of it. So why do they think, or Rallo thinks that this would be bad? For several reasons. He says, well, if then there would be such a price deflation caused by an increase in the demand of money, in a full reserve banking system where the banks could not increase the money supply, then this would be bad because, for example, in a gold standard, then more resources would be dedicated to mining, than otherwise, because the price of gold increases, it's a price deflation, which means that the purchasing power of money increases. If it's gold, then the price of gold increases. That it means that mining gets more profitable. That means that more resources are used for mining and less for producing other goods and services, which are so you have this loss in the production of the other goods and services.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably one main one. I guess there's a few different things to tease out here, because depending on what position you're coming from, there are some who come from this idea that, the government should manage, or the central bank or the state should manage the money supply, and then others who are maybe, they're not saying the government should do it, but they're saying maybe the commercial banking system should do this management of the money supply using this Real Bills kind of doctrine or idea, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. So they think that the government would be, due to several reasons, the government would be bad in doing this, due to incentives and so on. But the fractional reserve banking system would do it automatically, and would do it well. And they call it also to establish monetary equilibrium. So this is let's say a macroeconomic idea that there should be monetary equilibrium, that the demand for money should be equal to the supply of money. So if the demand for money increases, the supply of money should also increase. Yeah. No, the adjustment should not be due to prices, because there's these problems of what we talked about, that the resource costs of the monetary standard, also that prices could be rigid downward.
Yeah, and then in terms of the answer, it's essentially that the supply of money doesn't actually have to increase merely because the demand for money increases, right? Because, just because I feel more uncertain about the future, or I have more need for money to facilitate exchange, doesn't necessarily mean there needs to be more actual units of money, right?
Right. Yeah. This ties back to the idea, what is the optimal amount of money? Yeah. And as Mises and Rothbard say, once something has been established as money, that is, it's a generally accepted medium of exchange, the social function of money, that is facilitating exchanges, cannot be increased or improved or deteriorated by changing this quantity. Yeah. Let's say we have the dollars as a commonly accepted medium of exchange, as money, and then producing more dollars doesn't make it a better money, or destroying dollars doesn't make it a better money in the sense that it facilitates better exchange. Yeah. Once it's established, you see it most closely if we say, let's add a zero to all dollar notes and deposits. Yeah, it doesn't make it a better money, just prices multiply by 10 and that's it. Or if we subtract a zero from all notes. So once we have something established as money, this quantity is optimal to fulfill the function as money. And in this context, then the demand for money increases, or the supply of goods increases. That means that the purchasing power of this money will increase. Yeah, as you say, if we have a money supply that cannot be increased anymore, yeah, that is fixed, and then there is some uncertainty increases because people think that a war may break out, or there may be a natural catastrophe, and they want to have a higher cash balance. Yeah, they can do that. No, it's not necessary that new money is produced. What they will do is they will reduce the purchases and try to sell more of what they produce. And what is the consequence? If all people try to sell more and buy less, then prices fall. Yeah, until the point where they start to buy again. Yeah. So prices adjust. People then have a higher real cash balance, because with the same amount of money now they can buy more, and exactly it has been established what they wanted. And there's also a social function, which is normally then in these circumstances, for example, if uncertainty increases because of a natural catastrophe, people reduce their spending and they reduce their consumption spending. That is, they free up consumer goods that then can be used in those regions where the catastrophe strikes and destroys stuff. Yeah, so it makes actually sense to save. Yeah, in this, for example, not to go on vacation to the area that is affected by the catastrophe, or not investing in this area, makes totally sense. Of course, it changes relative prices. Yeah, but this is all part and parcel of the market process, and it's important information that is transmitted then through this prices. So I think it's a big error to think that the money supply must be increased if the demand for money increases, and to the resource costs of the monetary standard. Yeah, this argument that I mentioned before, that if gold is money and then the purchasing power of gold increases, then more mines will be built. Yeah, that is true. In fact, Milton Friedman said, well, the gold standard has very high resource costs. It doesn't make sense to dig the gold out of the ground and then put it behind the walls of Fort Knox. We can all save these costs by doing fiat money, paper money. Yeah. That's true. But all monetary standards have their own costs. Yeah, gold standard has their own costs. A Bitcoin standard would have costs, mostly energy, and fiat money has also costs, which are actually huge. Yeah, there are the salaries of the central bankers, the time of the people who analyze the Fed policy, all the analysts that otherwise could do productive stuff. Yeah, the printing, but most important, also the finance of the government. This allows the government to grow to a huge size, and most importantly, of course, the business cycle. Yeah, that we have financial crisis. I mean, this is a huge cost. Yeah, and on a free market, we don't have a free market in money. But if we would have a free market in money, people would, of course, take into account in their decisions when they choose their money, what they want to use, the costs. Yeah, they would compare. It would be subjectively look at what are the advantages of this money. It comes with this costs, but in a process of competition, then they would use one or the other. Yeah, so to say the argument that a full reserve system would have too high resource costs is against the idea of subjective economics, that people subjectively choose freely the money that they think is best for them.
Back to the show in a moment. This show brought to you by CoinKite.com, the creators of the best Bitcoin hardware security devices, such as the Cold Card Mark IV and the new Cold Card Q. Now, we use Bitcoin hardware security devices to keep our keys offline, our private keys offline. Now, the way these work is you can do that setup, write down your 12 or 24 words on the seed word cards, and keep that secure. Now, you can use this device to interact with the Bitcoin network using software such as Sparrow Wallet, Electrum, or Vector Desktop, or Nunchuck as a few examples. Now, you have a range of security features that you can use with these devices, such as passphrases, you can use seed XOR, or my favorite is multi-signature. Now, if you're starting in a basic way, just start with the device and the USB-C cable, plug it directly to the computer and use it that way, and then later improve your setup. But I believe these devices are great at helping secure your coins, especially as you start to migrate up into multi-signature security. But don't be disheartened or don't be scared away. They are accessible, and I think you actually do learn about Bitcoin in the process. So to get yours, go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get a discount on your cold card. The lead sponsor of this show is Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For listeners in the US, Bold lets you secure your financial future with complete peace of mind by integrating a low-fee, Bitcoin-only brokerage with next-gen multi-sig vaults. With Bold, you can smash buy Bitcoin or set a DCA plan for only 0.99% fees and seamlessly deposit the Bitcoin direct to your Bold Vault. The Bold Vault is a 2 or 3 collaborative multi-sig where you hold 2 keys and Bold holds 1 as a redundant backup, protecting against loss or theft. You can use Trezor, Ledger, or Cold Card hardware wallets to spin up a Bold Vault in just a few minutes, and the Bold Vault is the only collaborative custody vault available with 0 monthly fees. They're also offering 0 fees on your first $10,000 of Bitcoin buys and $25 of free Bitcoin when you buy $100 of Bitcoin or more. Try Bold today and upgrade your stacking experience over at getbold.io. Yeah, I think that's a really well put, and so it's really a counter to. So basically, it's this idea of a cash building deflation, right? As you were spelling out, it's this idea that for various reasons, whether that's uncertainty, people in the economy might decide that they want to hold more cash, and so be it. Like, that's their subjective choice, and it is always an entrepreneurial task. I think one interesting area, and you do touch on this in the book as well, is that there seems to be this ongoing desire for a stable money, right? Like, there's just kind of people just want stability in the money. And we see this not just in economists, but even kind of macro kind of commentator people, someone like a Jeff Snyder or someone like that, they might sort of have this idea in their head that oh, the money should just be stable. And, I think that just ignores a lot of the other realities of just the world today. I'm curious how, if you had to critique this idea of, stable money, why is that a problem? Why is there a problem with that desire?
Well, money can never be neutral. It can never be stable. Money is a factor of change, of human action. So the money will always change in value because people change their subjective valuations. The price of money, the purchasing power is just a price as other prices, like the price of milk. So should the price of milk be stable? No, because the preferences change. Should the price of money be stable? No, and it cannot be. It just cannot be in a free market. So it's an element of change. Money is an element of change, and a money that has an increasing purchasing power, is ceteris paribus, of course, preferred by people. Because if I hold money, I prefer money that increases in purchasing power to one that is stable. So moreover, sometimes it's argued, well, we need stable money because of information costs and so on. However, for economic calculation, Mises says, well, as we need a money that has not too high fluctuations in its purchasing power for economic calculation, obviously. But there will always be variations in the purchasing power. Otherwise, it would not be money. It would be something else. So yes, if we have very hyperinflation and so on, economic calculation is distorted. But on a free market, the money that is chosen will be some that where the fluctuations are not so wild. And to make it totally stable is not only impossible; would only be possible with the state. The state could impose, or the state can impose, for example, price control for the price of milk. It can do so. But there are problems for that. There are shortages or surpluses, which come along with this. Of course, if the price of milk is fixed by the government, then information costs for some actions are reduced. Let's say I'm an ice cream producer, and the government has fixed the price of my most important input of milk. Of course, this makes my planning easier. However, in other parts of the economy, the planning may become more difficult. First of all, because we have now to take into account the doing of government, interventionism. What will the government do? Will it lift the price control? Will it maintain it? So their higher costs are implied. And of course, there will be distortions. There will be distortions due to the price control that will lead, to chaos that increases the information cost. So we should have free prices, and also for the price of money, and not artificially stabilized.
Yeah, and there's a really great section there's a quote here. I recorded this. I wrote this down on prices. I'm quoting here. It's an entrepreneurial task to anticipate prices. Part of the entrepreneurial task is to anticipate the purchasing power of money. Thus, entrepreneurs must, can, and do forecast changes in the demand for money. Those who anticipate it better than others will gain, while others who are worse in their anticipation may lose. There is nothing arbitrary about this redistribution. It is entrepreneurial, right? It is an entrepreneurial choice here.
Yes, exactly. Because this is the argument that it would be somehow unjust or unfair if the purchasing power of money changes and there's a redistribution. But no, all people, acting people and entrepreneurs have to anticipate what will happen with the price of money, with the demand for money. And those who make errors in this, of course, they will lose. They will buy, for example, factors of productions at a too high price if they don't anticipate a price deflation correctly, a cash building deflation correctly. Then they will have losses, but others will have profits. So there's just a redistribution from those who are worse in anticipating these changes to those who are better in this.
Yeah. And one other thing, just going back to another thing you were touching on as well, this idea that, again, quoting from the book, ceteris paribus, market participants prefer a money that constantly increases in purchasing power to money with a constant purchasing power. And so it's also, and the reason for that, as you spell out, is because of uncertainty, right? Because if your money is going up in purchasing power, that helps you against uncertainty. And so in that way, as we were saying, it's an entrepreneurial choice, which money that you are going to choose. And over time, right, the one that's going to preserve your purchasing power. And I think it's fair to say, if you've been holding Bitcoin and using that over the longer term, you have seen this big increase in your purchasing power. So, in a simple way, you could sort of say, yeah, in that sense, it has worked for people who've been able to, let's say, hold for longer periods of time.
Yeah.
Okay. So with now, I think it would be good to just talk a little bit about some of these categorization issues. So you touch on this in the book as well, about how, from Rallo's perspective, everything is either a real asset or a financial asset. And so, whereas, let's say, the Austrians are viewing it in a more like, you've got consumption goods, things that, you consume now. You have production goods, things that you're using to create, consumption goods or other production goods. And then you have money. And money is in its own category. As Mises says, it's sui generis. And so can you explain for us what some of the issues are that are being created here when you don't have the right framework for what these different asset types are, and where that causes Rallos to run into issues here?
Yeah. He distinguishes between real assets and financial assets. And the financial assets money is a financial asset, but there are many types of these financial assets. So a stock, a bond is also a financial asset. So what Mises calls fiduciary media, that is unbacked monetary substitutes, for him are just a financial asset where people invest in. And this allows him, let's say, put it this way, this leads to a confusion in the sense that if I buy a financial asset, a bond or a stock, then I'm saving. Let's assume that I reduce my consumption to do so. And not I'm selling another bond or using it for my cash balance. But let's say I reduce my consumption and buy a stock, then I'm saving. And then, of course, the seller of the bond can use the proceeds and make an investment project, and it's backed by real savings. If I do it with another financial asset alone, it's the same. I give up purchasing power, I save, and the seller of the bond uses it for an investment project which is backed by real savings. Now, if we say that fiduciary media is also a financial asset, and someone who gets these fiduciary media in Rallo's view is then also saving. So the bank creates this new money, this demand deposit, this Mises would call it fiduciary media, by buying this real bill with new money. For Rallo is the receiver who gets who gets the money in his bank account by the bank. He's actually saving. He's investing. And therefore it's for him, the investments are backed by savings. And therefore he doesn't see that there's a problem. Because as you said, there's a categorically difference. Not only between consumer goods, investment goods, capital goods, and money, but also between money proper, perfect money substitutes, and financial assets. It's, let's say, a perfect monetary substitute, which is what you have on your bank account. When you open your online bank, you see the money there. It's a perfect money substitute because you can use it as if it would be cash. So it's a perfect monetary substitute. For Rallo, it's a financial asset that you have invested in. And therefore he doesn't see the problem of the credit expansion, which creates new perfect monetary substitutes, and actually he criticizes.
And we're coming back to this double availability problem. And so I guess the crux of the issue, and I think you spelled this out as well in the book, so listeners, for more detail, obviously check out the book, but the point I guess you're getting at here is that money is not a financial asset. Money is a present good, facilitating exchange and reducing uncertainty. And I think that's, once you've kind of understood that concept, then it sort of becomes more clear that you've got money and financial assets, and they are separate things. But in, let's say, Rayos's framework and the framework of many who are kind of in the fractional reserve bankers, whether they are like a Larry White and George Selgin or a Rayos or someone else who is a fractional reserve banker without really thinking about it, that's what's going on, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Therefore, it's sui generis money, because it's a present good that is used to facilitate exchange. It's not used for consumption, nor is it used as a capital good to increase productivity of your production process. It just facilitates exchange and reduces uncertainty, and therefore there's this categorically difference.
Yeah. So I guess let me just pull on that thread a little bit more, just to explain that. So in today's modern fiat world, people think of it like, oh, if I have, let's say, $10, or I have, let's say for rich people who have US government bonds, for them, that's, financial asset in there. Well, that is a financial asset. But to them, they might also think of that as money, right? So, and I guess in the Austrian framework, maybe you're seeing it a slightly different way. Can you explain that difference?
Yeah, this also ties back to a very important distinction that I would like to make, that you can use your income, Rothbard and Mises argues like that, on three margins. Your income you can use to spend it for investment purposes. That is buying a bond, for instance, financial asset. You can use it for consumption, or you can use it to add to your cash balance. These are the three different purposes. So, and if cash balance includes, of course, perfect monetary substitutes as well. And this implies that if the demand for money increases, that if people want to hold higher cash balances in the system of fractional reserve banking, it's interpreted as if there would be more real savings and more projects could be financed, because then the fractional reserve banking system, if the demand for money increases, creates new money, which is then invested. However, if you look at it, if people increase their cash balances, then demand for money increases. They can do it in two ways. Or they can reduce from their income, they can reduce their investment spending. That is, maybe I have a savings plan and I invest $200 every month. I reduce it to 100 and use the 100 to increase my cash balance. In this case, there are not more real savings available. But less. Actually, the time preference is determined by the relation between the consumption and investment spending. So if I spend less of my income on investment and more to increase the cash balance and remain constant the consumption spending, my time preference has increased. So at the same time, I increase my cash balance and I increase my time preference. I'm saving less. And this leads us to a very important distinction between the stock of savings and the flow. What is important here is the flow. That is, the flow is the consumer goods that are not consumed and that are available to sustain the factors of production which are producing the capital goods, in the projects, that we talked in the beginning, that make then production more productive, or the machines and so on. Or these people, these factors of production that are producing machines, they need they need consumer goods. And where do they get them? Where do they get them from? Well, from the savers who give up the consumption of these goods, and then they are transferred in the market process through the buy of bonds or stocks or so on to these people. So you see that an increase in this cash balances, which may be called a stock of savings. People say, well, my savings are so much. Well, this is a stock of savings. It's not a flow, and you need the flow to have more goods available, for consumption. So.
So, I mean, I agree with you on that, but I'm just curious how you would view it, like, as an example in today's modern fiat world. Now, of course, you and I have many disagreements with that, but let's say rich people today or companies, they do think, now, maybe they're kind of blurring the line, like moneyness or art, but they might see it like, oh, instead of keeping $100,000 or more because they're only guaranteed up to X amount. Above that, they might start holding government bonds because in their mind, that's what they do to, safekeeping of their money because they trust that the US government or whatever won't rug them later on, which, fine, that might be an issue. But, in their mind, are they seeing it, like from an accounting perspective, they might look on their balance sheet and be like, oh, I've got cash and cash equivalents, let's say cash in their bank account, in the business bank account, but also maybe some government bonds, US government 10-year treasuries or something like this. So I'm curious how you would, disaggregate that. Would you view that 10-year bond, the government bond, in this case, as part of their cash balance? Or would you see that as actually, that's part of their investment?
Yeah, this is part of their investment, because
right.
they have given up money, even though it's highly liquid, and Mises talks about it as secondary media of exchange, and secondary media of exchange allow you maybe to reduce their cash balance a little bit because they are so highly liquid, but the main difference here is that it's a credit transaction, you are giving up money to get it back in the future. While with cash, you're not giving up, you have it available. And with deposits as well. It's a perfect monetary substitute. You can use it at any time. So there's a categorically economic distinction between money and perfect money substitutes and, of course, investment vehicles.
Gotcha,
even though they are highly liquid, and they can be highly liquid, and you maybe actually try to make an exchange with them.
Interesting. Because to me it's sort of like that's the economic treatment of money, and then maybe there's a difference in accounting treatment or legal treatment, or at least let's say common practice today in the modern business world. And maybe what's happened is just there's been this blurring of the lines of like what is a perfect money substitute versus where maybe there's like a looser, like you said, a secondary monetary
medium of exchange.
Medium of exchange, and people are sort of kind of blurring the lines and saying, oh, well, it's close enough to money, and because of various legal protections in the system, the bank guarantee only up to a certain amount. Above that, they tend, in practice, in commerce, or rich people or high net worth people, they might do that. And so I guess, but economically and categorically speaking, to understand the issue, it comes back to understanding where are they creating a double availability problem, right? Like that's kind of the fundamental kind of, if you get down to the bedrock, that's what's causing the issue. No matter what you call it from an accounting perspective or a legal perspective or an economic perspective, that's what's causing the this artificial expansion, lengthening of the capital structure, right?
Right, with the 10-year government bond, people who buy them, they have given up the availability of the cash or of the money substitute. Yeah. And the difference is the money proper and the money substitutes you can use directly to buy stuff.
Right. Yeah. I
10-year
can't go to the
government
supermarket
bond,
and pay with a government bond, right? Yeah.
yeah, you have to first sell it. It's highly liquid, of course, but you have to first sell it to buy groceries, right? So this is the difference between a highly liquid secondary media of exchange and money.
This show brought to you by Mempool.space, the world's leading Bitcoin visualizer. And now they've got an accelerator program. So if you have a transaction that you sent at a fee that was too low to get confirmed, now you can fix this with the Mempool accelerator. The way it works, you can go and search your transaction, scroll down, click accelerator, and you don't need an account. You can pay with Lightning, and then it'll show you it's now in the process of being accelerated, and then after a few minutes, it's confirmed. And so this is a great way to help you out if you are stuck. And this can happen where maybe your wallet doesn't have RBF or CPFP, or it might help you in situations where it's impractical to go and re-sign. So for example, multi-sig with keys in different locations. And thirdly, even in some Lightning scenarios, perhaps a forced close, you might not be able to use RBF. And so in this case, the Mempool Accelerator can help you out. So keep it in mind, and you can find out more over at mempool.space/accelerator. And now, back to the show. Yeah, I think that's a really good clarification there. And then, so yeah, as you were touching on this idea of cash holdings as a stock, and then savings, the flow variable, like it's an ongoing savings that is used to finance the consumption of the people working on those longer term projects, right? Because those people working on the long term projects, they are not, let's say, sustaining themselves. They're working on this other project, so there needs to be enough saving somewhere else. And I guess that's where this kind of concept of real savings. So maybe that would be a good question to kind of go to next. So can you explain why is it that holding fiduciary media does not count as real savings?
Yeah, because the real savings are I'm abstaining from consuming a consumer good. Yeah, so I have my income and I spend less on consumption than the month before. So I'm freeing up consumer goods that come to the market, and and then purchasing power is transferred in some way or another. Yeah, it can be transferred in the way that I spend less on consumer goods and spend more. I buy a bond. And the purchaser of the bond then can buy the consumer goods and give it to his workers, to produce. The other way is that, and this is interesting, is that I increase my cash balance. Yeah, I consume less, and I don't buy the bond, but I increase my cash balance. What is the consequence? It's that consumer goods prices will fall. That is, the entrepreneur can, with the same money, now he can buy more consumer goods. Yeah, and sustain more workers. Yeah, actually it has the same effect. Yeah, the importance you see is the relation between my consumer spending and my investment spending. This is the relation that determines the time preference and how much real savings are actually available. Now, if fiduciary media are increased, that is, a fractional reserve bank buys or discounts a real bill, what happens on the balance sheet of the bank, on the asset side, there appears the real bill, and on the liability side, it puts in the bank account of the seller of the real bill money that is literally created out of thin air, that did not exist before. This is the nature of fiduciary media. Yeah, they are unbacked, perfect money substitutes. Now, the seller of the real bill, the company, the entrepreneur who sells it, now has more money on his bank account. But no one has saved. No one has reduced his consumption. No one. Yeah, but he has more purchasing power. So this is then the problem. This is exactly the problem, that there's a disconnection between the real savings. No one has saved more, but there's more investment spending available. Yeah, so if we increase here the fiduciary media, no more consumer goods suddenly appear. Yeah, it's almost like if we add a zero now to a bank account of an entrepreneur, then he can invest more, of course, but not more real stuff. Yeah, it's not more real consumer goods available. Of course, he has more savings in the sense that his stock of savings has increased. Yeah, yeah. If the government prints fiat money and gives it to an entrepreneur, then this entrepreneur has a higher stock of savings. But the real savings in the economy, they haven't changed. Yeah, and this is exactly what happens here with the Real Bills Doctrine as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. So look, I think we've covered a lot there. Let's try to summarize some of the key points then. So as I recall from the conclusion and sort of towards the end of the book, you sort of spell out that Rayos's idea of real bills credit expansion, it's somewhat of a step in the right direction away from like just full bore credit expansion, but it doesn't do enough, I guess. And so that's where you analogize with the Peel Act in the book about how they tried to do this, and in their understanding, the proponents thought that they would stop business cycles, but actually they didn't, because they missed this other mechanism by which again, fiduciary media can come in and be unbacked by real savings. So if you had to sort of summarize your critique, would that be the main critique, or how would you summarize that?
Yeah, in a sense, it's a step in the right direction, because Rallo sees it as problematic if a bank creates fiduciary media and grants a mortgage by granting a mortgage. Yeah. So by saying, no, you should restrict it only to real bill credit expansion, he's restricting the possibility of distortions. Yeah. However, what he doesn't see is that he doesn't limit it to zero, and it's the quantity what is important here. Because if the new money is created against a real bill, then we don't know where this new money will finally end up, where it will be invested. Because from the real bill thinking, it's okay, we have just to transport the goods to the consumers in 30 days, so there will be no long-term investment project financed by the new money, like in the case of a mortgage. Yeah, there would be a 30-year project. Yeah, we have just the 30 days. However, money is a fungible good, so we don't know where in the economic system it will end up. For instance, yeah, just to the entrepreneur who before financed the transportation of the goods out of his equity now has a real bill and does not need the equity anymore to finance the transportation. He has freed equity. Where will he invest it? Well, where it's more profitable, which is in the long term. Yeah. So if you inject in the loan market new money, the restrictions, the general credit restrictions will be lowered, and there will be long-term investments because they are affected as well. So yes, it's somewhat similar to the Peels Act in the sense that it's restricting somewhat, but there still is a loophole of doing it through real bill credit expansion, and then we will have the business cycle
right
as
and
well.
We're back to square one again, and it doesn't actually solve the problem. Yeah. Fascinating. So listeners, make sure today we've only covered just like kind of a basic, overview. Of course, go and read the book. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's available, Mises.org. The book is called Full Reserve Banking versus the Real Bills Doctrine. I do have a couple more kind of areas I wanted to discuss with you. Obviously, I like talking about Bitcoin. A lot of listeners are interested in Bitcoin, so it might be interesting for them to also discuss Bitcoin substitutes. And so just to understand, if we take, hypothetically, we're treating Bitcoin as money proper, right? If you have on-chain Bitcoin that you're storing, in your, let's say, in your hardware wallet, in your cold card or whatever. But there are other, I guess, mechanisms and ways that a banking system could evolve on top of Bitcoin. So as an example, just the basic level today, people can use, let's say, custodial Bitcoin, right? With Coinbase or Kraken or Binance or any of these big exchanges who also act as a custodian, and people can use the apps that, transfer around amongst them. That's one way to think of it. But I'd be curious to get your take on some of the other possible, let's say, substitutes. I'm not sure how. I know you've been on a few Bitcoin podcasts and you've spoken at a few conferences, but I'm not sure how familiar you are with all the different aspects of the ecosystem. So you tell me if you're familiar with them. But for example, there is liquid Bitcoin. Are you familiar with that or no? Okay, so basically what that is people are. It's a side chain. It's a custodial side chain. It's used as it's like a multi-signature. I think it's like 11 of 15 multi-signature. But these are like functionaries around the world. But the idea is you can cryptographically know how much Bitcoin has been pegged into that sidechain. And then once money is in that sidechain, people can transfer it around. Now, in terms of withdrawing it out, you're trusting that, in this example, I think 12 of 15 or whatever, or 11 of 15 don't block your exit, let's say, or your redemption. But in that way, you cryptographically know that every Bitcoin in L-BTC, it's kind of, you can see it's been pegged in. So in that sense, would we view that as a perfect money substitute?
Yeah, I mean, the key here is always if there are full reserves. So as I understand you, it's a fully reserved system. Yes. Yeah. The problem would be if some of these custodians, would issue more substitutes than they really have Bitcoin. Yeah. And then we could have, if we would have a Bitcoin standard, then we could have the same phenomenon of cycles as today. Yeah. If more monetary substitutes are issued, then there's money proper. So, which is the definition of fiduciary media. So
I see.
The fiduciary media are issued. So,
yeah. Interesting. And so I guess I think in this case with the example of liquid though, it is kind of publicly visible. So you can see how many L-BTC there are and how many have been pegged in. So in that sense, it's kind of an interesting use of cryptography to sort of allow this kind of alternate system that's kind of pegging in and out of Bitcoin. So that's an interesting one. There are also, I'm not sure how familiar you are with Ecash, Xiaomi and Ecash. Have you heard of the idea or no? Okay, so the gist of it is that imagine you could create this kind of, using privacy techniques and cryptography, you can create, let's say, centralized custodians. Now, what people are doing as an example is they can put some Bitcoin into that and they can trade that Ecash around very privately. Now, the trade-off of that is the Ecash custodian can inflate, right? So that's one thing. So there's kind of single custodian protocols, as an example, Cashew, and there's another example called Fedimint, and that's like multiple mints where they kind of have to agree. Now, I guess the question that I would have for you, and maybe might be an interesting discussion, is the idea is that these mints, theoretically, like you said, they can go fractional, right? Like they could fraudulently, either in the single case, just fraudulently create more Ecash than what they have Bitcoin, money proper, or in the Fedimint case, they could collude together to sort of create more tokens, to create more Ecash tokens than the actual amount of Bitcoin, money proper that they have in their vault per se. So I guess the question would be, do you see it then that, in that world, if a lot of people were to onboard into these Ecash and sort of use them to sort of as like a transactional layer, are we sort of dependent on there being enough, let's say, bank runs to sort of keep the custodians honest? Or do you? I'm curious if you have any reflections on that.
Yeah, of course, the runs will keep them at bay, but I would also bring the legal aspect in here. So, in my opinion, of course, I don't know the exact details how these work, but as I see it, is that it would be against legal principles, to inflate, it would be fraudulent in my opinion to do so. So you would not only need the bank runs, of course, the runs are one thing, but the other thing is the enforcer of the legal system would tell them not to do that and prohibit it. It would be a criminal behavior, in my opinion.
I see. Yeah. And so I guess that's an interesting, maybe that's kind of a parallel back to, 100 years ago or so, or when maybe bankers are arguing that the state should, let them suspend redemption in specie, right? And so that's kind of coming back to this same argument where, some people might, now of course I don't agree, but some people might sort of say, oh, that's just the free market. They're just kind of redeeming, they're just not, whereas like the full reserve camp, of which I would be in that same camp, would say, no, that was wrong, that the state allowed you to not redeem in specie, right? Like in that world, certain individuals have just been allowed to renege on their contracts, right? They've just been allowed to just not perform the obligation that they said that they would do, right?
Yeah, they would get away with the behavior that is illegal only because the state looks to the other side. Yeah, so what happened with banks would then repeat there in the Bitcoin sphere.
Yeah, so it remains to be seen exactly what kind of safeguards and checks. Now, some of the guys working on this, like Cashew and Fedimint, they are thinking about things like, as an example, could they do proof of reserves to prove how many Bitcoins are in those custodians or vaults, or could they do some kind of automated bank run kind of thing? And also in the Fedimint case, again, getting a little bit technical, I don't need to kind of bore you with technical details, but the let's say, in order for those Fedimints to work, they still need Lightning gateways. So Lightning is like a faster way of doing payments, faster and cheaper way of doing payments, generally speaking, for Bitcoin. And so those gateways are going to have to hold some Ecash balance. And so in that way, those gateways have to get comfortable with the Ecash custodians that they're not just going to inflate, right? So I guess there's like a little bit of, maybe there's an element there of like a market check and balance there that maybe some of the gateways are going to have to sort of scrutinize the custodians. And I guess maybe there's some historical parallels where maybe banks, there were different dollars. Like it wasn't all the same dollar. They had to look at them as, how creditworthy are they? So I'm curious, do you have any view on that? Do you think that would be like a parallel there?
Yes, the difference is, of course, that today it can be virtually done of the speed of light, the bank run.
Yeah.
Like in the 19th century, you would do a bank run, you would have to transport the notes, maybe with carriages over a long distance. But here it's the slightest doubt. Yeah, it can be, the run can be done within minutes. So this is a much more effective way to keep them in check.
Yeah, and that reminds me of even, I'm sure a couple of years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, there was a big, in the US, Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate, and I forgot the other. There was basically 3 banks that because the contagion happened so quickly, it was all over social media, and it just happened in the space of maybe like a Friday afternoon. And then the regulator stepped in, and that's still in the fiat world, right? That's not even talking about if we were in a Bitcoin world with Fedimints and Cashew and all these things.
Exactly, yeah. That's also the example what I thought of, yeah, these Silicon Valley Bank, yeah.
Yeah, and so then I guess the Signature was the other one. So the Signature, Silvergate, and Silicon Valley Bank. But nevertheless, I think it's an interesting time, and I think in that way, those of us who are fans of Bitcoin can also see that there's potential for it to evolve as a full reserve banking system. Because I think, as he said, I think there are more checks and balances available for the everyday users. Now, to be clear, I think there will be some users who get rugged or who lose out, and obviously that's sad. I'm not hoping for that, but nevertheless, the fact that it's faster to do a bank run and more automated now, and people could get like notifications on their phone, like, hey, people are doing a bank run, like withdraw straight away, right? And so it's just going to be a very different dynamic in that world when people can just like instantly bank run, and hopefully, well, we'll see, but hopefully the government doesn't come in and protect them lets them go under, right? Lets them go bankrupt.
Yeah, that is the key. If there will be a connection to the government system, like if a big player, JP Morgan or whoever, invest somehow in there and would be affected negatively by this bank run, then maybe the bank run will not occur. because participants think that the government will stand behind this player. Yeah, so it would be important that the government would not be involved in any indirect way through the traditional financial system in it. Yeah. So the best would be, of course, to have no government. Then it would be very quickly the bank runs into the system.
Yeah, I see. And so my understanding as well is from Mises and others, I think the way Mises called himself, a free banker, not in the fractional sense, in the full reserve sense, I guess his view was that over time, just naturally, without government intervention, the reserves ratios of these banks would be naturally pushed around close to 100%, or maybe they'd be just a little under, but they would generally speaking be around 100%, just through natural market checks. Is that your view, that it might not always be literally 100, but there might be times where it's kind of fluctuating?
Well, it depends. There can be situations where there are like implicit guarantees for these banks, and then it would be possible to reduce the reserve ratio. On the other hand, as we said before, in today's informational system with the internet, that can be done, as we have seen with last year or the year before, in an afternoon. So this would then oblige banks to hold very close to 100% reserves, even if there's no legal enforcement of the traditional legal principles.
Yeah, fascinating. And so I think coming back to, the why question as well, I think part of that is, I think that's why it's such a good thing to learn a bit of this monetary and banking theory so that you have a clear perspective on how to proceed, right? Because if you don't, you can end up running into errors where you just kind of recreate, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right? Like you just kind of recreate and rehypothecating fractional reserve banking system on top of the new thing, which obviously we don't want. I don't believe it will go that way. I think it will be naturally a full reserve system where maybe there will be people who try, right? We can't stop. There will be criminals and fraudsters who try to do fraud and do fractional reserve banking and inflate. But I think the market will have enough checks and balances to stop that. At least that's how I'm viewing it. I'm curious if you have any reflection.
Yeah, I hope so. Of course too. And I agree that it's important to know about this, because to go back again to the analogy of the Bills Act, if the error was of the currency school not to understand that demand deposits form part as a money supply in the same way as cash. So due to a theoretical error, they didn't consider this. And then the business cycles continued. So then when we get into a Bitcoin standard and we don't take into account the lessons from fractional reserve banking, then the system may be somewhat better than we have today, but there will be still the cycles, business cycles.
Yeah,
and this
interesting.
would be delegitimate, because this was a delegitimization of the currency school bankers, because they said if we do this Bills Bank Act, there will be no cycles anymore.
Okay. So then the public
continued.
can say, "Oh, look, see, you promised us this, and you didn't, and we didn't get it." And yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. One other area I'm curious. I know you've been commenting on this also. Is Milei down in Argentina? I know there's been, a lot of talk about this from a positive and negative side. I'm curious to get some of your thoughts there. I guess the way I'm seeing it, it's on the good side. Obviously, he's done some deregulation. He's dramatically reduced the size of the government. He has, for example, deregulated the housing market, and we saw more housing supply, rental market supply, which is obviously running counter to the whole price controls and all that. On the negative side, though, it sounds like he kind of sort of supports like the Ukraine and Israel, and I guess Safeteen's critique is also that it sounds like he's just kind of getting it ready for another IMF bailout, and he should have repudiated the debt instead of trying to take on IMF money. I'm curious, how are you viewing things so far?
Yeah, actually, I have been writing with Bernardo Ferrero in an article actually on this. Well, there can be many things be said about the Israel and Ukraine thing, for instance. First of all, Argentina is not an important player in geopolitics, so it's not really relevant what the stance of Argentina is. The other idea is in South America, you can be on two sides, or you are on the side of the socialist camp of Maduro, Lula in Brazil, and these people. And Argentina was on this side before Milei. Or you say, no, I'm against those, but then I'm with the US. Yeah. To be totally outside any alliances is maybe the ideal, but in practical politics it may be quite difficult. And on the repudiation of debt, of course, this would be the Rothbardian line. But in practical politics, it probably would have meant social unrest and that he would not be in power anymore. Yeah, that he would be Bush got out of power in 3 days if we would have repudiated that. There would be having hyperinflation, and there would have been riots, and then the opposition would have used this, where they would have steered, of course, the riots. There would have been dead people, and he would have been ousted from power. So the politics is the art of the possible. So what is possible in any circumstances? And there are many restrictions that we don't know, but have to be taken into account. So I think he is moving in the right direction. Also with his monetary reform, of course, I would like to see it quicker.
But and what about the idea that he's meant to be ending the central bank?
Yeah. So I asked him. He still wants to do that. You have to take into account that he has, I think, 17% of the members of parliament, 10% of the Senate.
Right. So there's a lot of concessions required to make things happen.
He needs political alliances. He has several ministers from another party, which are, well, let's say not Austrians, but are rather monetarists. So these people really would like to have the central bank to keep it. His aim is it, yeah. So the good thing is that he has this theory and he knows where to go. He wants to eliminate the central bank, but cannot do it now, yeah. And he wants currency competition, yeah. So this is something that all Bitcoin enthusiasts should be very happy about, yeah. And every free market people should be happy about this, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes people distort it, say, well, he wants to get into the US financial system by dollarization, but they are not looking at the reality in Argentina, that Argentinians are using dollars. They are holding dollars. So if you go towards the free market system, then people will first have these dollars, endogenous dollarization. Yeah, he calls it. Yeah, and then we will see what will happen later. The dollar, of course, will be is much better than the peso that had two hyperinflations. Yeah, and they eliminated 13 zeros from the peso in the last 50 years. So of course, for people, the dollar would be something better. Still, it's fiat money, of course. Yeah, but it's an improvement. Yeah, so important is that you don't go in the wrong direction, but you go as a politician in the correct direction. But we have to take into account that Milei is not an academic right now who can write down the ideal solutions, but he's a politician. So and I think he's doing a great job moving in the right direction.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I think that's one thing that maybe similar to the idea you were saying with the Peel Act and so on, that maybe libertarians now, many of us might be, broadly supportive of the idea. Now, I don't speak Spanish. I don't have like a lot of friends in Argentina. I know a couple people, but it's not that I know a lot of people on the ground. And so I guess in one sense you want to be supportive, but in the other sense you're also careful to not look like you're supporting something and then later it blows up because maybe he was, making it good, packaging it up for the IMF kind of thing, right? Just kind of branded in a way that would appeal to us as, let's say, libertarian free market guys. So I guess that's kind of the concern. But as you said, if he's ideally stepping in the right direction, and hopefully if things that do blow up are at least able to be said, well, that wasn't his fault, then maybe that's where you can leave it.
Yeah, of course they will. If it blows up, they will blame it on libertarianism or Austrianism. But the alternative would have been to continue on the socialist path. I know Milei personally, and I know that he's a libertarian and Austrian economist. So I trust him. When he says I have these restrictions and therefore I cannot do it.
Yeah, I see.
So,
I'm curious as well. While you were touching on as well in Argentina and in various other parts of the world, we're seeing this phenomenon of people using stable coins or fiat coins, let's say like Tether and things like this. I'm curious if you have any commentary on that. Like, do you think that ends up supporting? Like, I guess it allows people to escape from even worse fiat currencies, but in some sense, do you think it ends up also supporting the US government because ultimately they're buying fiat coins or stable coins that ultimately hold government bonds, US government bonds, and help fund the US government? I'm curious or if you have any thoughts on that, on what that looks like from a monetary perspective.
Yeah, the problem is here, of course, the involvement of the US government. Yeah. Of course, indirectly, it's supporting the US. Also, if Argentinians use dollars, not only in Tether or something like this, but also on the ground. Yeah, if the US can export dollars to other countries, it means that they are exporting the inflation to other countries and can be more inflationary than otherwise. Yeah. So this dollar imperialism is increasing. Yeah, by this. Yeah, so of course I would prefer, and people would go as soon as possible to real money.
Yeah, and I think, and to be clear, I mean the way I see it is, those of us who can access a US dollar bank account, we're not in a position to cast stones on people who can't access a US dollar bank account, and that's why they're going for stable coins, fiat coins, etc. So I'm not casting stones on the individuals because if I was in that situation, I would probably do the same, right? So I'm not blaming them, but it's just kind of, there is of course, we want to get separate money from state, and that's the long-term goal. But it seems like this is going to have to be an intermediary step for a lot of people, and so that's just the way it's going to have to be. But look, I've taken enough of your time. Thank you very much for joining me, Philip. So listeners, make sure, again, I'll put it in the show notes, Mises.org, the link. The book is called Full Reserve Banking versus the Real Bills Doctrine. Philip, thank you very much for joining me today.
Great. I thank you, Stephan. It was a pleasure. And thank you for all your great work distributing the ideas of liberty.